Welcome to Wartime Cafe. We have a special episode with a special guest, Shahd Abusalama from Gaza via the UK. You are here in Beirut. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, usually in Wartime Cafe, we start with the personal and we walk forward to the latest our guest has in their life. But given that much of the discussion about Palestinians, especially from Gaza, is all about their personal, we would like to give a chance for our viewers to know you as a complete person and know the contributions that you have given in the fields of your studies and accomplishments, and then get to the very touching and very deep issues of your personal life and that of people in Gaza in general. And on that note, I'm going to start with your PhD. You're a doctor. You taught in universities. Your PhD thesis explores the historical representation of Palestinian refugees in film and documentary film produced by the colonial authorities, produced by Palestinians and others. Can you explain a little bit more about this PhD thesis? What work it took? What's the knowledge that it added to the field of the study?
So, where to start? I feel like I can't separate my personal history from my choices and my journey academically and professionally and artistically, because it is my personal story, my family history that drove this passion to understand the ideological tools of violence that contribute to our dehumanization, but also because I didn't want to only deconstruct colonial narrative. I wanted to show how Palestinians used the medium of documentary in order to generate a counter identity and a counter history, reclaim our history that is being manipulated and erased by settler colonial Israel. So the field that the topic that I delved into is hasn't been done before, and it is about how Gaza particularly was represented in colonial, humanitarian, and Palestinian documentary film. And I traced the representations of Gaza historically since the advent of documentary. And unfortunately, as Edward Said noted in the field of representation, the West took the responsibility of representing the East, and at the heart of it was Palestine, of course. And by representing the other, they were also representing themselves in a more in a supremacist way, in a colonial way, and that has been like actually seen in the field of documentary. The earliest stage of documentary didn't shy away from appropriating colonial language and speaking about the Zionist project in colonial terms. And you notice how before 1948, that language was dominating the discourse, and the Palestinians hardly appeared in documentary film, although they formed the vast majority of the population on the land. But Western lenses showed consistent preference to the colonial minority, and by doing that, they basically erased um, all contributions of Palestinian society and even their existence. So Palestinians appeared as ghosts in the background, or like as if they didn't exist. It's sort of like manifested this myth that Zionists mobilized from um, late 18th century, uh, of representing Palestine as a land without people for a people without land, when it was far from being the truth. And then after 1948, you see Gaza being completely transformed by the events of ethnic cleansing that started in 1948 and ended in 1949. Gaza population tripled, or even multiplied by four times. And Gaza already then, in 1948, was described as an open-air prison, as a concentration camp of refugees who were living like my grandparents, were expelled from Beit Jirja and Asdod, and went to Gaza seeking refuge under, basically fleeing from Zionist thugs, the Stern and the Haganah and the Ergen, and other Zionist gangs that formed the IDF, that later pushed those Palestinians under occupation and condemned the Palestinians to a life of oppression. And in the documentary that you see after 1948, actually Gaza hardly appears. So part of my story, I don't just talk about the story of documentary, but I also talk about the silence of documentary, the absence of documentary when it came to mediating the Palestinian story. And it was only until 1968 when the Palestinian militant cinema movement was born and started to use camera in order to generate this counter identity and counter image and reclaim the Palestinian narrative and the Palestinian struggle as a struggle for liberation, for return. So there was a lot of actually like in the documentary field, you see how the physical isolation of Gaza is translated in the documentary field. So Gaza was actually rarely represented. There was only one film that was made by this exilic Palestinian movement that was mostly functioning first from Jordan and then mostly from Beirut and other refugee camps in Lebanon. There was only one film that the first film that talked about Gaza from a Palestinian perspective was called Scenes Under the Occupation of Gaza, and it happened in 1973. So imagine, already then, 2.5 decades of dispossession and occupation, and Gaza, let's not forget, it had a specific experience of violence, and it's been first occupied by Israel with Western support, particularly from UK, France, and the US in 1956, continuing to 19 57, and that occupation was characterized by horrific brutality, and those practices were systematic across our encounter with Israel and Zionism. And then Gaza would just again go completely unseen until 1985, when Solidarity filmmakers come and speak about Gaza in a film they called Gaza Ghetto, which again shows the systematic isolation and incarceration of Palestinians. That was the first feature film that talked about Gaza predominantly from Palestinian perspective, but it still included Israeli interviews and interviews with Israeli war criminals such as Ariel Sharon, and at that time we can see how the occupation took a settler colonial form and a military form hand in hand, which is changed after 2006. So I speak about all of this, all of these trajectories, the journey of documentary and the dialectical struggle within the field of documentary between those capitalist colonial forces that are trying to represent the other in reductive terms, and those who are trying to use the documentary to fight these established representations. And I end my research in 1993 because I believe that 1993 is a turning point in the liberation of Palestine with the
Oslo Agreement. Yes, and the capitulation really
to all the NGOs and the funding, the conditional funding that was coming from Europe and the US, and was trying to limit our voices and pacify Palestinian populations. And I spoke to so many Palestinian filmmakers who experienced in one form or another silencing and limitations on what they can speak about, if they commissioned certain topics about, for example, the right of return or Palestinian political prisoners, they would be faced with huge backlash and attempts to basically restrict their projects. But they wanted the Palestinians to speak about safe issues that would grant them these EU funds or US funds, and I mean, like, the documentary field is largely a representation of the reality, and that's why actually I called my book.
Yes, you have a book deal, alhamdulillah, inshallah.
Yes.
People can read this research in a book form very soon.
Exactly. So the book is going to be called Between Reality and Documentary, and it speaks to this idea of the Palestinians being trapped between the reality of things and the representations of things. And I hope that it just contributes to all Palestinian and global efforts that try to free the Palestinians of reductive representations that reduces them to either victims or terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, most people can think about how perverse NGO funding is in and they don't understand how perverse film funding is sometimes, and most of the times it's very rare to find a funder that allows you to do your film work without their interference in the editorial of the documentary. You have taught in many universities in the UK. You taught in Sheffield. You taught in London's college, and you have.
And I've been giving also freelance lectures because I've also had a struggle with precarious employment because of being Palestinian.
That's what I was going to ask you about specifically.
Yeah.
You know, you're right now in Lebanon,
yeah.
in Beirut. You're going to be doing a postdoc in the Lebanese American University, LAU. Your research is going to, continue to build on your thesis, but also will be looking at the 2019 demonstrations here in Lebanon, the coverage in the media, the live broadcasts that happened during those demonstrations.
That's right.
But before we get into that, there's a reason that you're here. It's not like you just decided to come to Lebanon because that was and that's clearly the harassment and attacks on your academic life in the UK. What happened there? Some of our viewers obviously know the basics, but let's tell the people that don't know what happened.
First of all, I see this Zionist campaign as not just a campaign against my employment, but it's targeting my very existence. And not because of my person, because they don't care about me and they don't know me, they don't know my struggles. They're not interested in empathizing with a Palestinian. The fact that I'm Palestinian and the fact that I've been all my life, since my times in Gaza, fighting to amplify our calls for liberation and return. And the fact that I've been for nearly now 10 years in exile, a face to my people and a voice to my people, trying to make Palestine present in any arena of struggle. That is what made me subject to their targeting and silencing and malicious accusations of antisemitism.
I personally will never call it antisemitism because
anti-Jewish, rather than anti-Semitic. It's true, but they are masters in manipulation,
euphemisms, saying the opposite of what they want, and also on colonizing language. They colonize the identity, Semitism, and the word Semitism when we are the true Semites, the Shamis.
Exactly, but it is what it is. In the West, anti-Semitism equates anti-Jewish sentiment, and it's just incredibly outrageous because I mean, like, what would it take for them to understand that we don't care about the religion of our occupier?
Because it's actually our religious heritage. Judaism is ours, not theirs. Just like Christianity is ours, not theirs.
I mean, like it's just you don't know where to begin, trying to expose the malicious accusations there, and basically I became a testing ground for the IHRA definition of antisemitism, which is an ideological tool of silencing that is deliberately trying to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Jewish sentiments.
Just for our viewers, the IHRA is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to
And
be
it's
caring for
designed-
the Holocaust
Yeah.
memory, but it is tainted, infected by Zionism that is trying to take the memory of the Holocaust
and manipulate and exploit Holocaust in order to endorse other Holocausts on other people, with Western support and with support of anti-Semites. And this is something that actually Theodor Herzl has said in his theorization of the Zionist project. When he wrote this pamphlet about the Jewish state, and he wrote clearly then that anti-Semites will be our best allies, and they've done that exactly. And actually, Balfour, that sold out Palestinians' right to self-determination, was far away from being the savior of the Jews as he's being claimed now. He was one of the biggest anti-Semites, and in early 1900s, he was the one who introduced what is called the Alien Act, which is an act designed to bar Jewish refugees escaping European and Nazi antisemitism that was increasing, whether in Europe or in Russia. And so he was far from being the savior, and the Zionist project was like treated as a double game. On one hand, the European leaders that didn't want the Jews and talked about them in derogatory terms and dehumanizing terms, the same way the Palestinians are now being called human animals and cockroaches and cancer and all sorts of dehumanizing naming that wants us to strip us of humanity. So that has been practiced against Jews of Europe at the time, and the anti-Semites and the Zionists, the Jewish Zionists of the time, were in complete agreement with the sentiment of
the idea is that the Jewish Europeans don't belong.
Yeah, and they would
with
never
their
assimilate.
Compatriots. Yeah.
And the idea that they would never assimilate, and they basically use this common ground in order to reach a double gain. On one hand, we get rid of the unwanted population, the unwanted Jewish population, and on the other hand, we create a European-like colonial outpost that serves Euro-American access and interests.
In the land of Palestine. You reminded me of one thing. The Zionists currently like to use this racist connotation. Why aren't the Arabs taking Palestinian refugees? It's because they don't love them. You see, even Arabs don't love their own Palestinian brothers and sisters. What they want everybody to forget is that not one European state took one Jewish refugee from the Holocaust. The Canadian Prime Minister said one Jew is too many Jews when the ships were trying to arrive after the Holocaust on the shores of Canada. So what is it? Do Europeans don't even want their own Jews? This is where, of course, it's a racist connotation that European Jewish Europeans are not like their European brothers and sisters and can be assimilated. All of that is racist. Society. But this is the truth. The truth is their own compatriots didn't take them after the Holocaust, and we took them in Palestine. And our people in the Arabic world are much more tolerant of not only refugees from within us, but refugees from outside our region, from the time of the Chechens and Cherkessians, the Armenians, the Greeks, all of those people that lived in our lands.
The Palestinians have welcomed Jewish refugees the same way they welcomed survivors of the Armenian Holocaust, and they shared with them their culture. They welcomed them into their farms and homes, not knowing that that they had this project to replace the Palestinians. So the Jewish refugees, unfortunately, weren't like any other refugees. They came with this predetermined ideology and goal to eventually replace the Palestinians and eliminate the existence of the Palestinians. And that is, of course, not exception to Zionism, but it is a goal that has been consistently sought by all other settler colonial ideologies, whether in the Americas or in Africa, in South Africa. But I hope just as South Africa apartheid was defeated, the French was defeated in Algeria, the settler colonial project in Palestine will be defeated and the Palestinians will be.
Inshallah, we're very close to that. I want to take us back because we strayed there. You know, this is what Zionism does to us sometimes, takes us, even our thoughts, strays our thoughts there. I want to take you back to the campaign attacks on you and your academic life in the UK. How did this campaign start, and what did they do to you?
So I had just lived with my people through the horrific days of Sheikh Jarrah, being threatened with yet another wave of dispossession and expulsion, leading into Saif al-Quds, and we call
2021 and 2022
attack on Gaza, and I've been, of course, throughout my time in the UK, very active in the struggle for Palestine. By the end of that year, in 2021, I was trying to focus on finishing my PhD, and at the same time, I was engaging in conversations with the university about my upcoming teaching. So I was really like trying to shake off all the tension of the 2021 and the long-standing tension that accompanied me throughout my PhD and my struggles in trying to change policies within the institution that participate in dehumanizing Palestinians and enabling the Israeli oppression of Palestine. Because at the university, as a survivor from Gaza, I couldn't look away and pretend not to know about certain business partners the university had with the likes of JCP and Caterpillar and BAE Systems and Rolls-Royce and many others that have historic and ongoing role in the consolidation of Israeli systems of domination in Palestine. So I was always fighting to change and cut these ties, and being met with frustrations upon frustrations upon frustrations in an institution that claims to be supporting decolonizing education. We had a campaign that was trying to decolonize education, and various anti-racist campaigns at the same time, and they were always like claiming, of course, free speech and what is an academy without those values of academic freedom and freedom of speech. And yet, Palestine is consistently the exception.
Mm-hmm.
And that was exposed in my story. I have barely started teaching. So I started teaching on the 17th of January, a module called Post-Colonial Media Culture. And I was really excited. So I went to meet my students, gave an introductory lecture. That was a Monday, so the beginning of the week. On Friday, I was going to meet my students for the second time. And just before going, I'm checking my email, and I find an email from the department saying that my teaching is suspended until further notice following a complaint. Where is this complaint from? What is the nature of the complaint? What is the nature of the investigation? Anything. I was just left in the dark.
So you were guilty before anything. You were guilty before proven innocent.
Yeah, exactly. I was just guilty before proven innocent. And that just tells you that just because I'm Palestinian, they project. They haven't realized this. I wish they do acknowledge this. But I experienced this horrific times as a projection, a racist projection, because I am Palestinian and because I'm fighting an enemy that claims to represent the Jews of the world, which is far away from the truth. They are hijacking Judaism the same way ISIS is hijacking Islam. And basically, after this email, after the email that I received from the department, I felt that my very existence is being under attack, not just my career. And I felt that I needed to fight back. It was clear to me that they were trying to make an example of me in order to intimidate, especially Palestinians, using their knowledge of our vulnerabilities in the Western world, in a context that is infested by colonial legacies and racism, and a so-called affinity with the Zionist project.
It's funny how all rights, or at least theatrical rights that are in the West, are immediately suspended. The right to defend yourself, the right to be innocent until proven guilty,
the right to reply as well.
The reply to your accuser, because you don't even know your accuser or have a right to reply to them.
Yeah.
And the basics basically of common law, or what they call common law, is all suspended. And this is done over and over in many settings, but of course is very egregious in universities because of the added layer of hypocrisy about freedom of speech and academic freedoms. I remember one time I was targeted also many times in Canada, but this concept of the Zionists trying to use a lightning rod, as they would call it, an example that they parade in the squares to scare everybody else. This is kind of what they were doing to you.
Exactly, and believe it or not, the source of the complaint was the fact that I defended a first-year student at the University of Sheffield who wrote a placard for the marking of the International Day of Solidarity with Palestine on the 29th of November each year. And she chose these words for her placard: "Stop the Palestinian Holocaust." And then she was risking a disciplinary action by the University of Sheffield for saying "Stop the Palestinian Holocaust," because apparently this placard had offended a manipulated, brainwashed Zionist who it's just beyond me, to be honest. Like, I just don't want to even try and rationalize why they are offended by "Stop the Palestinian Holocaust." Because, like, why can't we make comparisons between various contexts of oppression? Why?
Because then you will be challenging the supremacy. You don't know that Jewish people, their suffering is the biggest suffering, and their feelings are more important than everybody else's feelings. Their doctors, their comedy, their whatever, it's the best. It's the best. And if you don't say that, if you actually claim that Jewish people, followers of the Jewish religion, are as equally good and bad as every other human being, then you are being anti-Jewish, apparently. You have to admit their supremacy, otherwise you are anti-Jewish.
Incredible, but also they are trying to claim to speak on behalf of all Jews, and we have to move away from this and expose Israel for actually fueling anti-Jewish sentiments in order to sustain itself and to justify its existence, while continuing relentlessly to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians and exploit the narrative of the Holocaust and this monopoly on victimhood that they've created since the Holocaust in the West. They've secured it in the West in order to distract from their relentless crimes against the Palestinians. And that is not acceptable under any terms, under any religion. It's just not acceptable. And I am sick and tired of just like being demonized and silenced and having to always like justify that I am speaking for our rights to freedom and our rights to justice, our rights to equality. I'm not like speaking about I'm innocent of your racist projections, but they want to continue cornering us in the defensive, so we are distracted from actually exposing their crimes. And this way, Israel wins because they don't have to.
Well, it's a dream that they have that they would win this, and obviously they have this.
No, they will never win, of course.
They're also very angry for when Palestinians in the diaspora, that they can't just kill us like they do inside our occupied territories in Palestine, and seeing a well-spoken, proud Palestinian, it drives them crazy. So let's just go back to your case, because we can, they occupy our mind, the Zionists, and we sometimes have to find ourselves having to speak about every little detail about their problematic behaviors. But let's go back. They sent you this letter saying you were suspended from continuing your teaching, pending this investigation. What happened with the investigation?
I didn't wait for them to come back to me. I felt existentially threatened, and I was aware that it will not stop at me. So I had to fight back, and I mobilized a counter campaign that has reached all corners of the world. The inboxes of the leaders of my university were filled with letters of support and protest to their mistreatment and discrimination against me and racism against me, because it is clear when they evoked the investigation. The investigation was based on Sheffield Hallam University's recent adoption of this misleading definition of anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition. And it is inherently racist because it contains a denial to the Palestinian experience. One of the examples that the IHRA definition flags as potentially anti-Semitic is saying Israel is a racist endeavor. What is Israel if not a racist endeavor? Racism and supremacy was inherent to every settler colonial project, and Israel is no exception. And they have said that publicly. There is no secret that they were trying to realize a reality where there is a land without Arabs. And to this day, even now, as I'm watching my family survivors living through genocide day in, day out for nearly 9 months, we see Zionists from Brooklyn to Tel Aviv calling on the IDF, the so-called IDF, which is the Israeli occupation terrorist forces, on finishing the job, calling on them, IDF, finish the job. IDF, finish which job? Finish the job that Ben Gurion started. Ben Gurion being the first president of Israel who read the proclamation of the so-called independence of Israel as the ethnic cleansing was still waging in full view of the whole world and in front of the eyes of the British authorities that were then still haven't withdrawn completely. So
you start the campaign, support, the world comes to your support as they are, humanity is coming to the support of the Palestinians right now during this genocide. How did this process end?
In 2 weeks, because of the support that I managed to rally behind me, in 2 weeks, we managed to turn the tide. And I was reinstated on my own terms, back to teaching. And I, even by the end of my teaching, my students, my own students, nominated me for the most inspirational teacher of the year. And despite all of this, and despite reassurances from the university that they have now understood where those malicious accusations were coming from, and they reassured me that they are going to offer me with protections. As soon as I finished teaching that semester, I was subject to yet another investigation. So I was being harassed, not just by Zionist media that is dedicated to glossing the image of Israel in the West and protected from accountability, but also by the academic institution that I was a member of its community for more than 5 years. And I fought, I continued to fight back, and I continued to engage with their investigation process, trying to expose to them yet again how malicious these accusations is. And believe it or not, again, another ridiculous evidence for for the Zionists, ridiculous evidence that contains a lot of oppression, a lot of pain that is being basically completely flipped on top of its head and misinterpreted to suit Zionist narrative and victimhood. So I am speaking of being chased by Israeli oppression and Zionist oppression beyond our occupied territories. Because this is my experience. The oppression didn't stop once I crossed Rafah border and went to the west, because my Palestinian identity has continued to be with me in my name, even if I want to completely forget about my people. I couldn't, because I'm carrying my name, I'm carrying my skin color, I'm carrying my curls, I'm carrying my birth as Jabalia, my place of birth is Jabalia, my documents are Palestinians. So my story represents the narrative that Zionists sought systematically to erase. And that was threatening them.
Your mere existence.
My mere existence is threatening to them because it exposes their lies. And they did everything possible in order to turn my victory that was hailed all over the world into just endless struggle against silencing and demonization. But the Palestinians are not strangers to Israel's attempts of silencing that range from character to physical assassination. And I am here in Beirut, where Ghassan Kanafani was assassinated with his 17-year-old niece in a car bomb planted by Israeli Mossad. And I was targeted in the UK, and in the UK as well. Najil Ali, he was assassinated in the heart of London, and he was a symbol of Palestinian cultural resistance. And there are countless examples of Palestinians who were facing endless silencing. Edward Said was speaking about it. Jasif Masad was speaking about it. So many Palestinians spoke against this systematic silencing that we face in all arenas, whether in academia, in media, and even now, as we are being slaughtered before the eyes of the whole world, we are facing this in more vicious and aggressive ways.
So, talking about what we're facing right now, the genocide in Gaza that's being broadcasted, it is very close to you, and because you have family there, you had family there, you were born there, and this genocide also intersects not only on this personal level, but also with your story of this struggle at these universities and the oppression of the Zionists chasing you in the United Kingdom. Tell me about your family and about that intersection. How you were supposed to go, I heard, to Gaza just before the beginning of this genocide. Explain how the oppression in the UK intersects with this oppression on the ground, and then we'll talk about your beautiful family and their struggles.
Yeah. It's just I feel like I need to sigh before starting to answer. It's a packed answer. But there's just no end to physical and ideological violence. And you'd be naive to think that leaving Palestine will free you of the chains of colonialism. And every Palestinian who lived in exile knows this firsthand. But especially in the West, we struggle in so many ways. Like, I found myself struggling as a Palestinian in a context that prioritizes the the colonizer over the colonized. The lives of the colonizer is worth more than the colonized.
The opinion of the colonizer.
Yeah, and the colonizer is always represented on behalf of so-called modernity and civilization, when it couldn't be clearer now that this civilization is a mask to barbarism.
Savagery.
So I also fought against the racist migration system. I was stuck in the British refugee system for 8 years at least, with huge periods without any papers, unable to travel, precarious migration status, and just at the same time following my family in Gaza, just surviving, daily struggle for survival. I myself lived through multiple rounds of Israel's mass killing and destruction. I was born in the midst of the first Intifada in 1991, during a curfew, when my grandmother had to walk in Jabalia Alays alongside my mom with a lantern in one hand, because it was 2 a.m. at night in the middle of a blackout. A lantern in one hand and a white flag in the other, saying that we are bringing a child in peace. And they were facing deadly consequences by an army that was indoctrinated to kill any moving being. And they were, despite the visibility of my mom's pain and her labor, they still entertained harassing her, pointing a gun at her belly. So this is how I came to life under occupation in Gaza. And this is a story that repeated itself so many times. And the plight of pregnant women right now in Gaza is too understated. And then my consciousness about the reality around me was starting to form around the second Intifada. I was hardly 9, and I started to understand, because Muhammad al-Durra, the child Muhammad al-Durra, was killed, sniped, just like a few hundred meters away from my home. And he was only a couple of years older than me at the time. And I remember my parents were trying to protect our childhood. And they wanted to reassure us that we are safe. But then when we told them, like, how is Muhammad al-Durra is killed? They couldn't give us answers. They couldn't give us answers. So imagine the struggles as well of parents struggling to provide basic needs.
Or even the assurance of safety.
Yes.
Which is in itself impossible almost.
And at the same time, our home, our family home, was constantly raided by Israeli terrorist forces, terrorizing my family. And again, something that Palestinian families are no strangers to. And then 2006 happens, and I'm 15. And
that's the blockade begins.
That's
the
when
siege.
the blockade. But I had felt then some hope by my people, yeah. But this hope was crushed immediately.
The hope was because of the expulsion of the Zionists from the Gaza Strip,
Yes.
And then it was crushed immediately with the fall of the siege.
Because we didn't understand then that the occupation was only changing forms. It was changing from a settler colonial military form that existed in roots and settler outputs so close to our homes and schools and communities in the Gaza Strip. Within the Gaza Strip, there were more than 70,000 settlers by the time, by 2005, when they started to bilaterally disengage, they so-called disengage from Gaza. But then it turned out that they were not disengaging, they were just rearranging the occupation and changing it to a remote control occupation where they could choke the Palestinian people in Gaza and isolate the Palestinians even more from other communities and from the rest of the world. Because my generation grew up completely
like on an island, cut off from the humanity.
Cut off from humanity. I couldn't imagine, like, we grew up to stories of, for example, my mom studying nursing and working in Jerusalem in Al-Maqasid hospital. And Jerusalem, by car, without checkpoints, it would be half an hour away. So close and yet so far from us. Most of my generation grew up completely isolated from the rest of Palestinians and the world. So this reality has always been with us. So the hope, the hope that we had soon after diminished, because in 2006 I've lived through the so-called rains of summer, what Israel called rains of summer. I remember this attack so vividly. And it was basically, the rain was a metaphor to bombs falling indiscriminately on top of our heads. And the deaths of, the scenes of death and destruction were all around me, and no place where it was feeling safe. Even inside our UN school, inside our UNRWA schools, we would be taken into evacuation routines by like a mimic as a school, like going through this routine in anticipation of a potential bombing or invasion to our school. So these traumatic memories has made me realize that Palestinians' existence is under threat, and we are facing a brutal settler colonial occupation that will fight us until we submit. They won't accept.
And or defeat them.
Yeah.
And or there's no between. Either they
indefinitely.
genocide us completely, or we defeat them completely.
Yeah.
You lived through 2006. You lived through 2008, 2009.
And 2012.
And then you finished your bachelor's degree
in Gaza, in Al-Azhar University, that has been now destroyed completely, alongside
along with all of the
universities in Gaza.
And that gave you the chance to go and do master's and PhD studies.
And I fought so hard to leave our open-air prison. It's not a matter of booking a flight.
People don't understand that.
The freedom of movement that people enjoy in the West, they take it for granted. But actually, in our case, I spent weeks going back and forth from the north of Gaza, where I lived in Jabalia, to the very south of Gaza in Rafah, trying to cross.
The crossing that got destroyed right now by the Israelis.
Exactly.
And then the Egyptian harassments and all of the money that has to be spent to bribe people to get even through the crossing. You got to the UK.
Yeah.
You did the master's, then you did the PhD. We spoke about those. We spoke about the harassment there. Now, tell us about how these two stories come back to reconnect just before the Holocaust in Gaza starts.
I mean, I was just reflecting in a piece for an academic journal about my story and trying to write about it in a context of our collective struggle. And the memory of me being chased by the Israeli lobby in the UK and being demonized and vilified and discriminated against by my institution on the back of defending a student writing "Stop the Palestinian Holocaust." This was consistently, repeatedly triggered as I'm living throughout this Holocaust now with my family. Since the early days of Holocaust and the genocidal ethnic cleansing of Gaza, my family were uprooted and were forced to leave from Jabalia and head to the Al-Nusayrat refugee camp, and experienced multiple displacements during various months of genocide, nearly 6 months of genocide.
You almost were going to be inside Gaza.
I was planning my return. In August, actually. I was looking forward to return and reconnect with my family and friends and revisit all the places where I was born and raised.
Because of the attacks on you and having to fight that battle?
And because I had a court case that was still continuing, and at that time it was scheduled for November. And I was so looking forward to meet my brother, my youngest brother, Muhammad, who was robbed, I feel. He was robbed of me. 14 years of my life in exile, we couldn't meet because he was living in Gaza and I was living in Britain, and I had a refugee status. But just in July, I became naturalized as a British citizen. And that allowed me to start dreaming about my return to Gaza. So I was already planning it. And luckily, my brother Muhammad received a visa from Spain through my sister, who also became naturalized in Spain just recently. So he came to Spain, and I meet him for the first time at the beginning of August after 10 years. That reunion was incredibly emotional and fully lived, because we both know how much time has been taken from us and lost because of Israel and because of the racist European visa system that rejected my brother Muhammad on the basis of him being a potentially refugee. Yeah. Although he was never interested in leaving Gaza. He was never, neither my parents, they were never interested in leaving Gaza. All of us were wanted to leave. If we wanted to leave, we were only willing to return to our lands and villages that were dispossessed from us in 1948. That was the only movement that was accepted to us. And that's why we held into our refugee camps for all these decades. 76 years of holding onto our refugee camps, waiting to return. And here I am now. Everything familiar to me has been destroyed. My home, where I was born and raised, not only bombed, but also burnt by Israeli forces. It was set on fire, like other homes were set on fire systematically throughout this genocide. And this practice, this terrorist practice, wasn't only limited to Gaza, but also chased Palestinian communities across West Bank. Our lands and farmlands were set on fire just recently during the genocide in areas of West Bank. Our cars, our homes, I mean, families were killed because their homes were set on fire by settler fanatics while people are inside. So, and we are, the irony is that we are chased and policed. Our language is being policed, and we are not allowed to even use the word Holocaust to describe Israel's terrorist practices against
What a
our
crime
people.
to think that your feelings could be comparable to the feelings of a Jewish European settler. I mean, your feelings are less worthy to the West.
It's just
But
absolutely.
so let's just end on this. Your parents lived inside Gaza. The Holocaust began. Your brother already had made it out by that point.
My brother was the last to survive in my immediate family, and he left by the end of March after surviving through incredible horrors.
And your parents exited Gaza when?
In February.
In February.
My mom first exited around Christmas. She was the first to exit, and then my dad and my sister-in-law and nieces, and then finally my brother. So we had also a very painful experience with my family being dispersed between the north and the south of Gaza and Cairo and Europe, and constant flow of horrors and loss that continues to flow till this day. Just recently, on the 15th of June, we received the news of my cousin Shuruq being slaughtered in her home with her 18-month-old baby, Siraj. So they were both killed while sleeping in their home, and her husband was also injured severely at the same attack, and followed them on the 19th of June, just four days later.
Allah yarhamhum, and may God never forgive their
and our families are continuing to survive under indiscriminate bombs and starvation. The struggles that they are facing, not just on daily basis, but on momentary basis, is beyond our imagination. And this is a stain on humanity that will expose, that has already exposed the barbarism of the so-called free world that speaks on behalf of democracy and human rights, until it is concerning the Palestinians. And then they fail us. And here we are being failed again and again by barbaric forces, unfortunately, not just in the West, but also collaborationist regimes in the Arab world as well. Watching our
the starvation of Gaza wouldn't happen if the Egyptian regime of Sisi was not collaborating with it. That's for sure. Your family, alhamdulillah, are safe, the immediate family, outside now.
But you know how our families are not like oriented like this. We're not oriented as an individual family. We have, extended families. I grew up so close to my uncles and aunties from both maternal and paternal sides, and my cousins, I grew up with them like siblings.
And they are still all stuck there.
And they're all stuck there. And their children, they feel like nephews and nieces to me. And I'm watching them like hardly 5 years old.
They are where right now?
They are dispersed between the north and the south. But the majority of my family remained in the north, the majority of them. And those in the south cannot guarantee even returning to their homes in the north. And all of the north is completely devastated. All of it, like hardly any home is remaining, protected and not damaged. And people, my family survivors, returned to their bombed homes, like trying to renovate any part of the home where they could just live together and be safe. But they are facing incredible struggles. And we are facing incredible struggles trying to reach them. Like, imagine, we can't even call them to comfort them sometimes. And sometimes we call them and we receive this record on play saying, the connection has been cut with our beloved Gaza Strip. Peace for people of Gaza and peace for Gaza. And like, imagine hearing those words. Like,
this is what the Palestinian telephone company has
the Palestinian telephone companies would give us this voice
when you can't reach,
and incredible struggles, like the psychological warfare as well couldn't be like more understated. It has to end. It has to end, and the people need to wake up to Israel as a danger that is not just facing the Palestinians, but is facing humanity as a whole, because it is being enabled by other barbarian powers that are willing to undermine all mechanisms of justice that were put in place to ensure a never again, and yet we see them all undermined, and everything we believed in is being just put under the rug and rendered meaningless.
The Zionist occupation expands beyond Palestine. It encompasses all the West and all the vassal states that it controls. It has descended on the minds of people. It controls the daily lives of students across the whole West, and anyone, our communities, our diaspora communities, the Palestinian, the Arab, the Muslim communities, the racialized communities that are all right now under threat, and on the other side, the liberation of Palestine will liberate the world.
That's right.
And inshallah, it's very close, it's coming. Your perseverance and your pride and your struggle among the struggles and pride and perseverance of Palestinians across the diaspora and on the ground in Palestine is what's going to bring this liberation. Inshallah, it's coming very soon. Shahd Abusalama, Shahd Abusalama. Thank you very much for being with us today on Wartime Cafe,
so
Free Palestine Television. Our website is freepalestine.video. You can find all our socials there. Stay with us, donate, so we can continue doing this work and bring you amazing, important voices like Shahad's, and reporting from the ground on the borders with South Lebanon and occupied North Palestine. I bid you all a free Palestine. See you next time.